Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. A contact of mine through both business and politics and society posted a very poignant post on LinkedIn recently about his cancer diagnosis, and it was really quite heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time because of his positivity in the face of a pretty daunting diagnosis. And so I thought I'd reach out to him and ask him if he would share some of his thoughts and experiences and outlook with us. And Gareth Seltzer has agreed to do so. And so welcome to the show. Gareth is a seasoned business advisor. He's considered to be one of Canada's most connected executives. He's addressed audiences on brand building and innovation. He was co-founder of RYOT, an American content company that had producer credits, even including an Academy Award nomination in 2015. He served as a director of many different foundations, including the Michael Garron Hospital Foundation, Dying with Dignity Canada, Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation, etc. But Gareth last year was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive cancer, salivary duct carcinoma, and has been very open, as I mentioned, about his experience and how to manage big, crazy change, the way Gareth explained it. Thanks for being open, and thanks for chatting with us today.
No, it's a great pleasure. Great pleasure.
So tell me, why did you want to share this diagnosis with your world? What's the message that you're trying to get out there?
Well, I guess there's two parts to it, and thanks for asking the question. The first is that I am, a sharing person. I've always shared on social, especially, but just generally with people what's going on in my life and the different things that are happening professionally. And so when this happened, I was deciding whether I would make a decision to sort of continue to be open as a human being, or whether I would start curating what I told people. And I would probably say when I first got the diagnosis, one of the things that was made very clear to me is this is going to occupy an enormous amount of your time. And as a consequence, I thought, well, it would only be rational for me to include it as part of my story. And the second is I didn't want to have a curated existence, either on LinkedIn or on other social media. So I just thought, this is the time what the hell? Let's just share a real, genuine experience, which is touching thousands of Canadians as we speak today.
And you mentioned before we started that I reached out to you, but lots of other people have reached out to you. What's the reaction that you're receiving from people?
I think the two most common reactions are, I get a lot of "you got this," which is just a way of somebody having a touch point saying, I have faith in your resilience. I have a lot of people who see some of themselves in the story. And I think that's the part that resonates most profoundly and drives some people to touch back, even if I don't know them. They see themselves in this because somebody they know or themselves has had a life-altering diagnosis, whether it's cancer or an accident or something similar, or they know what it feels like to be absolutely on top of the world one day, and then the next day, everything is different. And I think that's a resonating characteristic that people immediately identify.
You've, to me, always been one of those larger-than-life individuals in Toronto. You've been involved in business and politics and in charitable organizations. As I mentioned earlier, before we started, my last memory of you is jumping off the boathouse in Muskoka, which you did with a relish over and over and over again, and dared everyone else to do it as well. You've traveled North Korea, Borneo, Sweden. You motorcycled around North Vietnam. You've been a scuba diving instructor. How do you live in a new world? It must be an unbelievable change.
In so many ways, it is. It is in part because no matter how extraordinary you may feel this about all the different activities you're involved in and your business commitments and your family commitments, this just occupies a fairly significant part of your emotional space. And so that is difficult. As I always say, we don't have enough time for ourselves just in an ordinary life. And then all of a sudden you have this avalanche of new data, new material, and very important decisions to make in an already busy world. So one of the things that I would say is, you start skimming off the things that are less important. And it's actually an exercise that I highly recommend to everybody. Whether you are Einstein or a Seltzer, you still only have 24 hours in the day. And one of the ways to make sure that you use it well is to not spend any of it on frivolous, non-productive time. And I guess I'm finding it possible to still have an extraordinary life and still deal with this time-consuming diagnosis by eliminating the things that I considered inconsequential to my happiness and the happiness of my family.
We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how Gareth found this cancer, what the prognosis is, what the treatments are, and then a little bit more about the rest of his life. Stay with us, everyone. This is going to be an interesting and I think poignant conversation tonight. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. My guest tonight is Gareth Seltzer. He is a businessman, a seasoned business advisor in Toronto, in Canada. I've always seen him as being one of those guys that just knows everybody in the crowd at the Board of Trade or at a charitable dinner or in business or up in Muskoka as he drives the boat around and socializes. And someone that, was, as I mentioned earlier, larger than life. You were traveling, you knew everybody, you were involved in everything. And so getting a cancer diagnosis must have been pretty shocking. How did you discover this?
Honestly, it was one of those unusual paths where I had a terrible toothache. I'd gone to a dentist. My dentist wisely said you should see an oral surgeon. Maybe it's a molar. I went to my oral surgeon, somebody I'd never met before, a Dr. Adam Kaplan, who's got a small, inconsequential practice, but he's a hugely finessed oral surgeon. And he just took a look at me and said, I don't think this is dental. You should get an MRI. And he saved my life. He saved my life. So I went, got an MRI. The MRI said, you have a mass. We're thinking, you get these little things. We're getting older. There are lumps that appear all over. And that MRI suggested I have a biopsy, and the biopsy came back the next day, salivary duct carcinoma. I was a little concerned. I could read in the pathology. It said malignant, extensive, but at the same time, I know that these are shared with other diagnoses, which aren't necessarily not necessarily unmanageable, like prostate, and so I wasn't too concerned. Then I looked it up, and then I realized I had a truly life-changing diagnosis. The key element was that they said this tumor has to come out before any treatment. We just need to get it out tomorrow. But so 3 weeks later, I was at Princess Margaret, and I had radical surgery. It's the most remarkable surgery where they essentially take out most of your cheek on the inside and your parotid gland. They take out all of your neck, a total radical neck dissection. They put some of your neck back in your cheek for facial reconstruction. And many people think I'm better looking than I was before. So I still talk too much, but it was an extraordinarily good outcome, at least from a surgical perspective. And then I had a radiation, which for many people is exhausting, and it is, but I'm finding my way back.
And do you have tests now? And are you what's the state of your cancer now?
Well, I'm early into it. It is one that has a relatively poor prognosis historically. So I actually, my last MRI was about 12 hours ago, and I've been having an MRI or a CT every 2 months, which is probably what's going to happen for the next 2 years. But I would say, one of the things that they tell you, and I think this is true of anything, is to start living and getting back into your normal routine. One thing for sure that it has changed is I say, people change because they have to. People change because maybe they've heard enough and are inspired to, and people have perhaps received enough and they are truly driven to. And what I would say is I was in the have to category, but when you have a big diagnosis, something that makes you reflect on life, usually you end up changing for all three. And I would say I'm hoping that I'm a better, more caring, more thoughtful person than I was before.
Have you reflected on life?
Yes. I mean, I would like to think that I'm not a bad character anyway, but the truth is, I think the part that I'm reflecting the most on, and that's what has driven me to a lot of work in the charitable sector, but I know people give in all sorts of ways, very quietly for many and very openly and publicly for others. But I would probably say that you had a guest on a while ago, Michelle Capobianco, and she was talking very articulately about how money is donated. Research follows the money, and the money goes to the kinds of illnesses and diagnoses that are the most prevalent. And breast cancer, for instance, in women being the most prevalent by far, or prostate cancer for men. And what this has reminded me is that if you're an outlier in anything, you don't get the same kind of attention. So I would say what it has done for me, Brian, is it's made me think much more positively about pushing the outlier, the things that are overlooked because they're not so common, which is where I sit with salivary duct carcinoma.
You've traveled, an unbelievable amount to some really interesting places and some dangerous places. And then in your post, you said this was like another dangerous journey. Seriously? It's another dangerous journey? Is that how you think about it?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things about traveling, and I think sometimes we do it, particularly in our youth, without fully reflecting on danger, we feel we have control over it. And certainly one thing about a cancer diagnosis is, in fairness, you don't have control. You are not in control. It's just something that you can't change. That said, about a journey, there are elements of, let me backtrack. The leading cause of death in cancer is late diagnosis. I mean, that's the leading cause of death, I would argue. And checking to see, looking for the kinds of suspect issues that you may have genetically, for instance, those are the kinds of things that you actually do have control over. So, yeah, I mean, I think I fooled myself. I went to a number of places, North Korea certainly being one of them, that perhaps was a little dodgier than I would do now. But I do feel like this trip, the cancer trip, I have more control than I anticipated. At least I do, certainly in my messaging, which is for people to get screened earlier, to understand what they're looking for in this moment where there's more happening in cancer research and development than there ever has been in the history of cancer research.
You said you learned some things over the course of the last year. What have you learned?
Well, I would certainly say that be aware of, be aware of your own self. My family doctor didn't save me. My dentist saved me. My family doctor actually said, "I'll tell you one thing with certainty, you don't have cancer." And that was about 4 weeks before I was diagnosed with cancer. So I think one of the things is to be very aware. And the other is, as you walk down the street, you need to know that there are people walking down the street who are also battling issues of all sorts of kind. The person who doesn't open the door for you in the subway, don't curse them. You just have no idea what is going on in their life. And so I think one of the things it's a Henry James quote, which is there's 3 important lessons in human existence. The first is be kind. The second is be kind. And the third is be kind. And I think I'm paying more attention to that. And I would hope that lots of other people do. Everybody is on a journey, and everybody has complexity, and everybody is intersected from time to time with adversity. Forgive me, this is one thing that I have to do now, which is I don't have any saliva production, so I need a little water.
That's completely understandable. Are you more empathetic today than you were in the past?
That's a That's a great question. I would probably say that I grew up in a hugely empathetic family. The documentaries that I produced are always on empathetic issues, which is really seeing something from somebody else's point of reference. But I think speaking to the importance of being, empathetic to others, I think that has gone way up my list to the top, really. And yeah, to be very conscious of how things feel and look to other people.
Being conscious about how things feel and look to other people, but then you exposed yourself to the world and you became very vulnerable. And, I have to tell you, one of the things I wouldn't have described the Gareth Seltzer I knew is vulnerable, but you became very vulnerable a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, that's there's a number of great people, I think, in this city. Tim Hockey is one, and his fantastic outreach and fundraising for cancer. There's just been so many inspiring people. And yeah, I talked to my wife. This isn't just, I didn't just sit down and decide I'm going to share a story, because I'm very conscious that I plan to have another interview with you in 5 years. But
I look forward to it.
There's the possibility, a real possibility, that we'll look back at this a year ago and I won't be, a year from now, and I won't be here. My personal view is that's not going to happen. But just as much as the dangers of everything in the world, crossing the street, making one ill-thought decision, being intersected by someone else's poor judgment, things can happen. And I remember years ago when my brother and his wife were killed in an accident, I received almost 200 letters from people I did not know, all sharing with me the stories about how they were informed when their son had died, or that their police coming to the door when their brother had died in a motorcycle accident. And what that told me, to your point about empathy, is if you give people an invitation to express something that's really important, most will do it. And I thought that it wasn't just therapy for me to tell my story. It appears that it's therapeutic as a general conversation, to open it up for people to talk about something that we generally don't want to hear about. All you ask, how are you doing, to somebody, you don't really want to hear about their troubles. You're just doing it as a courtesy. But if you frame it in a narrative that says, I want to know how you are, like, tell me something bigger than what you just see from the outside, I think people find that healthy and enjoy doing it, and it's a touch point.
Well, and I do think that too often social media and pleasantries on the street when you bump into people are all about positivity and the positive things, and we don't get a real sense of the honest lives, the real lives that people are leading. And too often you don't know about some of the tough things that happen to people, because we may not be as open and as vulnerable as we should, and we may not be as friendly and as communicative as we should, and so therefore we don't know things until they're too late. And so I think one of the big benefits, probably, of you being vulnerable is, I would imagine, a lot of people that care about you have reached out and have said things to you. And I know you've got a wide circle of contacts and friends, but that wide circle wouldn't have all known about it until they read about it.
I think that, that's, you're touching on this so beautifully. It's the philosopher, advertiser, gin owner Ryan Reynolds, who said, the faker you are, the wider your circle, and the realer you are, the smaller your circle. And these are just absolute true facts. And so at the end of the day, choosing who would be real. Who are your real friends? This is not a group of 14 people. This is a group of 4 people. These are, and this is a seminal decision that I think everybody needs to make, which is to invest your time in people who care about you. And in that context, I would say I've been very lucky to have a few people who immediately rallied to support me. And and I love them. And they wouldn't necessarily be open as I have, but they have welcomed being exposed as part of my journey. And it's all very individual. And the way I'm doing it, I wouldn't do it any differently. I'm not even conscious of what I'm doing particularly, but I sure know that, if this is just, statistically, if 1 in 7 women are walking down the street will have breast cancer in a lifetime, and almost the same number for men. Every time I walk our dog, I'm walking past somebody who is having a cancer battle at some point of the walk. It's just mathematically impossible for that not to be true. So we need to be conscious of the fact that these are real issues that are hugely randomized. They have no particular, generally speaking, no particular order. And we need to be mindful about being better people and more generous people and a little less self-centered.
Well said. Gareth Seltzer. We're going to take a break for some messages. We'll be back in just 2 minutes with Gareth Seltzer. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Gareth Seltzer. He is a business advisor. He's a connected executive. He's a brand builder and innovator. He was a producer of some documentaries, one that even included an Academy Award nomination. He's been a director of numerous different Canadian foundations, Hospital Foundation for Dying, Dignity Canada, the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation, etc. But last year, he was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive cancer, salivary duct carcinoma. And a couple of weeks ago, he was very open about his experience on LinkedIn. He may have been before that, but that I became aware of. And I wanted to reach out to him because Gareth is one of these people that we haven't known each other really well, but I've certainly known you a couple of times. You've been kind enough to invite me up to your cottage. As we mentioned earlier, forced me to jump off of your boathouse. And you're always this bigger than life, gregarious, outgoing, connected, shaking hands. I always think about you with the arm around the shoulder kind of guy, slapping the back. Bigger than life would be the way that I would have described you. And during this, you said you had a back office of friends that have come to support you. Tell me about that.
This is, when you I think you've described me accurately, certainly, as I look from the outside. I think you nailed it. Like I am a person who really enjoys touching base with people. And when I was a money manager for families many years ago, one of my, I won't call it a trick, but certainly one of the things that I like to do was get right to the chase about people's families. It's like, rather than the niceties, who's doing well, who isn't, what are the problems, and just finding a point of connection. And that was really, truly because I was interested in it. I would say that, there's the people who really have your back aren't necessarily the people that you see all the time. They're just people that you have a moment with who have expressed concern or care. So I was incredibly lucky to have 4 people who stood up, but I hadn't been that vulnerable or that open to a couple of them before. It was just that I recognized that they may be open to me saying, here is the emperor with no clothes. I have some serious issues, and in 2 weeks, I'm having surgery, and my doctor said, by the way, use this time to put your affairs in order. And that was a hugely difficult moment. And I thought, I am not going to be able to do this by myself. In fact, I'm not even going to be able to do it. What I need is some people who will look after that should something adverse occur. I don't know if that's really answering it, but the nature is, when you make a decision about who is really powerful in your life, or who can help you, including a partner, who can help you with your children, who should be a good mentor, those aren't decisions based on how often you see somebody. That requires you to be a nuanced judge of character. And if there's one thing that I would say is the most important thing, it's be a nuanced judge of character. Be sure to be making carefully calibrated decisions about who you spend your time with and who you can call on in this moment.
What advice would you give people listening tonight, given your experience?
That's I'm not sure that I'm oddly enough, I'm not sure that I'm a good person at giving advice, but what I certainly would say is that it's hugely important to stop a moment. I say this to somebody who's getting married, even at some point during the ceremony, just stop and look around. Just think of how lucky you are. And I think my advice, given my experience, both with the diagnosis, in understanding my journey and finding out who really has my back, I was able to make fairly well calculated decisions on those with my wife, Monique, by stopping for a moment. Just turn everything off. And I think the idea that if you did that every day, just for a moment, not as some, Tony Robbins exercise, but just stop every once in a while. Then if you're called on to make some very dramatic, crucial decisions in your life, you will have had sort of the back office experience to know immediately who will step up for you. Nobody has disappointed me. The people that I was counting on were incredible. And I think that's because I chose well. And I'm very lucky, and I fooled them entirely. I don't know what it is, but I'm incredibly fortunate. There's no question about it, and not everybody is as fortunate as I am.
Well, you've had some incredible connections and some incredible friends and clients. I think. How did you become such a well-connected person? How did you create such an incredible network of clients and such a wonderful network of friends? What's your secret sauce?
That's the little fairy dust. I think for sure, I have a great friend who's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Canada, just extraordinary. And he just said, as he went up the ladder, fewer and fewer people would disagree with him. And he's actually found that very frustrating, to be around a table and just not have anybody challenge him. And
now invite me for a drink with him. I'll disagree.
Yeah, so perfect. And so I think one of the things that is my fairy dust is everybody is equal. And I remember at some event introducing my mother to the late Queen Elizabeth II, and I said, Doreen Seltzer, Her Majesty the Queen, Your Majesty the Queen, Doreen Seltzer. And I was corrected many times afterwards about my lack of etiquette. But the reality is the two of them then went and continued chatting for about 15 minutes. And my thought was, in that moment, I just had a very human connection that was created between these two people. And that really reflects the fairy dust, is just talk to people as you would as if you'd known them for a long time. And the magic perhaps is with the reverence necessary, given whether you know them, well or not well, so that you're not making any bold leaps in terms of intimacy. You're still just talking to them as real human beings. So somehow you do that enough. And I suppose the other part, forgive me, is just I've been intersected by great good fortune. And I don't have a secret entirely for it. I think part of it is some people are blessed, and I've been blessed, and that's maybe part of my responsibility to give back.
You've met some and worked with some pretty impressive people. I understand you've met and worked with Elon Musk and Paul Allen.
Yes, actually, there's Elon was an early supporter of Riot, our company in California. He's has co-produced a number of the documentaries that we made. And I actually found him remarkably sane. I think perhaps he's not the man. I don't know whether he's the man that I met, but we did a number of things together. We've had a lot of dinners together, and my sense really is that he is an inspiring human being, and he's a person who has this secret sauce. He walks in a room, the temperature changes. There's just no doubt about it. Paul Allen was a co-producer with Vulcan of our film Body Team 12, which was about the Ebola outbreak in Monrovia. And of course, he was keenly interested in eradicating Ebola. And so he ended up coming on and donating a huge amount of money to our effort in promoting the film. These are people who have come to the table not because of who they're connected to, but because they have found some point of contact that they find hugely captivating. And I think for Elon, it was that we had a great interest at Riot at having a really marginal impact on our environment. And we were very keen on rallying up an audience of young people to feel differently about sustainability. And that was our point of contact with them.
So most people wouldn't be able to have a conversation with one of Canada's most successful entrepreneurs, or Queen Elizabeth, or Paul Allen, or Elon Musk. Tell us, what's your secret? Like, what is it? Come on. Like, how do you end up establishing these relationships with these people?
I have a great friend who is the head of global sales for a company called Broadcom. And I asked him, what is the thing that makes his top sales force all have in common? And, is it some kind of knowledge of the territory or their product? And his answer was simple: courage. And they just had the courage to go and call again. And I would probably say that that's a little bit of the secret that everybody could have access to. I was certainly, it wasn't from any particular contacts I had. I started with no contacts. Hardly anybody I know today I went to school with. But I do have the courage to pick up the phone and call people. And every once in a while, someone will call and say, could you please, Gareth, introduce me to so-and-so, who is a CEO? And I'd say, you know what? You'd be remarkably amazed at how easy it is to call them if you just call. Some of them answer their phones. I don't think this is something you need me for. Also, if you do that, you're demonstrating that you have courage. So secretly, I think I'm not afraid of people saying no. And I'm not calling for disingenuous reasons. My first visitor after my surgery was Victor Dodek, who's the CEO of CIBC. And I joked that he was probably just checking on the status of my line of credit. But the reality is, he's a gentleman that walks the walk of, he cares for his friends, for his associates, and I believe he cares deeply for clients of CIBC. He showed up, sat down, and just said, what can I do? And I just think, well, there's another guy who just walks the walk, and no airs, and I know it's good fortune, but I think that came from courage originally for me too. Just speaking to him as if he, you know what, I see something in you I like.
Well, I think you're showing courage right now, and maybe your special sauce is getting people, forcing people, inspiring people to jump off the top of your boathouse. Because that little act of courage probably then pervades the rest of their lives. And so thank you for making me jump off the top of your boathouse.
Oh, no, we'll get a higher one for you, Brian. We'll get a higher one for you.
I look forward to it. We're going to take a final break and come back with Gareth Seltzer in just 2 minutes with some concluding comments. Stay with us, everybody. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Gareth Seltzer. He's a gentleman that I've always really looked up to. And frankly, Gareth, I'm looking up to you now with your courage to face what must be pretty scary. And the fact that you're doing it in a vulnerable way and trying to share your experience, your lessons, and some of your emotions, your philosophical learnings with your wider audience, with people in Toronto that know you and have affection for you, I think is wonderful. And so thank you for that. I know you wanted to say something about modern information, modern data. Tell us the message that you wanted to give on that.
Well, I just think we are. Thank you, Brian. We're living in perhaps the most rapid state of change in cancer research than we ever had. And while previously there'd been discussions about whether you should have a mammogram or who should have one or how often, the reality is there are things like genetics in BRCA1, BRCA1, and BRCA2. These are things that I don't need to go into the depths of, but These genetic variants absolutely tell you your risk factors, and they give very specific treatment and therapy passages and protocols that can change your risk for cancer. So what I would say is, as horrific as I feel my diagnosis was, it's exciting to have it in a time where there's never been more opportunity for advancement and therapy that will extend my overall survivability. And I believe this is true for anybody. So knowledge is power. If you're female, I think you should know whether you have this genetic variant. It's hugely critical.
2 years ago, I had a cancer scare that turned out not to be cancer, but I had a lump, and they rushed me in for a mammogram and an ultrasound, and then an MRI, and I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly the Canadian healthcare system responded when there was a potential of a severe problem. Then I got very frustrated because I didn't hear back from them for the longest time. And I think the reason why is they came to the conclusion it wasn't cancer. And so therefore they didn't need to,
Right.
worry about me. And I was worried sick during that time period, waiting for their answer. But they did use modern medicine and modern equipment and came to my defense very quickly. Life is short. Was one of the things that I learned during that process. You've got a big sign on the wall behind you about ice cream. Is that sort of one of the messages that we should have more enjoyable treats? Or, what have you learned about life is short?
Oh, I think, it's to circle back to some of the questions you asked me earlier. It's to make sure that you live well. And that is not related to money. It's just how you use your time. The most valuable diminishing asset we all share is time. And I think, as you share your story here, it's one of the things that, in fact, Michelle Capobianco spoke about, which is finding out that your life may not be as long as you anticipated, and how disturbing that can be. But I think it's less so if you're using your time incredibly well. You will have fewer regrets, feel more comfortable with yourself, and more deeply and richly rewarding relationships with others.
So go get tested, use your time wisely.
Absolutely.
Have courage.
Yes.
And be vulnerable.
I think that's it. And by the way, some things, if you wanted to be tested for the BRCA1 variant, you can just sign up for 23andMe, and it will test it. There are other ways around finding out your risk factors. But I think being open, being vulnerable, Brian, I think you've nailed it. Like, these are the keys to personal happiness.
Gareth, I look forward to getting invited to jump off of your house again.
You should start swimming now.
And I look forward to chatting with you in 5 years about how things are going, because I think that the best is going to happen to you. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your experience with us, because I do think that there's someone listening tonight, if not several someones, that are going to be inspired by what you have said, either to go out and get tested or to have a little bit more courage with whatever they're facing in life. So thank you very much.
Brian, a great pleasure to be with you.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Gareth, for everything you've done for our Toronto community, and good health. Godspeed. Good night, everybody.